The visitor has passed.
And most people have no idea it's happening.
3I Atlas, the interstellar enigma that held the world's gaze for months, is now receding into the dark.
1 minute ago, something changed in deep space. It happened suddenly and every major observatory noticed. 3I Atlas shifted its course.
An interstellar object known as 3I/Atlas is not just passing through our solar system, it is changing course.
This was a clean deviation measured in over 1 million kilometers. The object is not moving away from us anymore. It's coming closer, and its trajectory is now bending inward.
And more importantly, it is getting closer. This alone should make us pause, because objects arriving from outside our solar system are supposed to follow predictable paths, but what we are seeing now does not neatly fit those expectations.
Right now, behind closed doors, physicists are asking a question they never wanted to ask.
3I/Atlas is refusing to behave normally. This raises a difficult but necessary question: what forces are acting on it?
If this thing is changing course on purpose, then it just broke the most powerful rules of physics. The physics breach. A few days ago, something happened that shook orbital mechanics to its core. A lateral movement, 1.1 million kilometers off the predicted path, was confirmed by the International Asteroid Warning Network.
This object has just been discovered. 3I Atlas was discovered on July 1st by the NASA-funded Atlas survey.
At first, it looked like an error in data. Observatories double-checked, then triple-checked. The answer didn't change. 3I Atlas was no longer where it was supposed to be. For scientists trained in celestial mechanics, this wasn't just a mystery. It was a breach of the most fundamental rules. Interstellar objects don't just decide to drift sideways. They follow trajectories determined by gravity, momentum, and radiation pressure. There is no room for improvisation. But now, that assumption is broken. To understand why this is such a big deal, you need to understand how space objects normally behave. In the vacuum of space, nothing turns unless something makes it turn. Most comets follow predictable paths. They slingshot around stars, sometimes shedding gas and dust as they go. This release, called outgassing, can cause a comet to accelerate slightly, the same way steam shooting out of a kettle can make it wobble. But it's always in the direction opposite the outgassing. It's never sideways. And it never produces sustained lateral drift. But 3I Atlas just moved over 1 million kilometers in a direction that has no clear cause. It wasn't a gentle drift. It was a sharp deviation that required a force, either external or internal, capable of counteracting the sun's gravity and reshaping its trajectory in real time. That's not outgassing. That's propulsion. Now remember Oumuamua? Back in 2017, it made headlines as the first known interstellar object. It didn't behave like a typical comet either. It had no visible tail, no outgassing. Yet its speed changed slightly as it left the solar system. Scientists argued over what caused that motion. Some blamed exotic forms of outgassing we couldn't see. Others, like Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, suggested something radical. Maybe it wasn't a rock. Maybe it was a light sail. A thin, artificial object pushed by sunlight. 3I Atlas, however, is something else. It's bigger, brighter, more active, and now it's moving in a way even Oumuamua never did. The idea of it having onboard propulsion isn't just speculation anymore. It's becoming the leading theory behind closed doors. The Vera Rubin Observatory, which tracks deep sky objects with one of the widest fields of view on Earth, is now monitoring 3I Atlas around the clock. Their focus isn't just on where it is, but how fast it's leaving the solar system, or if it is at all. The math shows something odd. It isn't accelerating away, it's not even holding a consistent arc. It's shifting, adapting, correcting, like something with a mission. And here's where things get even stranger. A shift like this over such a massive distance requires a huge release of energy. If it came from a natural source like a burst of gas, we would have seen it. Every major telescope pointed at it. But no burst was seen. No sudden brightening, no trail. The trajectory just changed, silently. Scientists studying the data are calling this non-gravitational acceleration. That's the technical term used when an object's motion can't be explained by gravity alone. For Oumuamua, the explanation stayed in the realm of the possible, even if it was unlikely. But for 3I Atlas, the possible list is shrinking fast. To rule out natural explanations, models were run using every known scenario: volatile jets, solar radiation pressure, even magnetic drag. Nothing accounted for the magnitude or direction of the displacement, and yet the object kept moving as if it had somewhere to be. The comet's shape also adds fuel to the fire.
My guess is that it's most likely a natural object, but the existence of those anomalies trigger my interest in trying to figure out whether they might represent something else.
Early radar imaging hinted that 3Y Atlas isn't spherical, it's elongated. Some analysts say it resembles a metallic shard with angular protrusions. That shape wouldn't survive long if it were a chunk of ice from a random star system. But it could survive, if it was made to. And now there's one more unsettling detail. After its maneuver, the tail of 3I Atlas shifted. Instead of pointing away from the sun like every comet in known history, the tail began to angle forward, toward the sun, almost like it was being driven, not dragged. This tail, or anti-tail, as scientists are now calling it, doesn't just break visual expectations. It breaks every model we have on how solar radiation affects cometary matter. The idea of propulsion isn't science fiction anymore. It's data. Cold, hard numbers showing motion without cause. It's movement where there should be none. It's behavior that speaks not just to anomaly, but to intention. The implications are staggering. If 3I Atlas is self-correcting its course, then it's not simply passing through. It's not a wanderer, it's a visitor. And every agency monitoring it knows exactly what that means. Something this large, this fast, and this responsive isn't just reacting to our solar system. It may be reacting to us. But if it's adjusting its trajectory now, what exactly is it aiming for next? The blackout and the jump. For weeks, the trajectory of 3I Atlas was under intense scrutiny, but no one expected it to disappear. Not entirely. Not like this. It happened during what should have been a routine observation window, just as the object approached a point near solar conjunction, moving behind the sun from Earth's perspective. Even with a star blocking some of the view, modern telescopes are rarely left blind. But for 47 minutes, every single deep space observatory lost contact, and not just optical loss. Telemetry vanished, radio silence. Even infrared data from thermal imaging arrays cut out entirely. This wasn't a gap in Earth's observation arc. This was a system-wide blackout. From Chile's Very Large Telescope to South Africa's Meerkat Array and China's 500-meter Aperture Spherical Telescope, every station, every frequency went dark. It wasn't a timing issue. It wasn't weather. It was something far more controlled, something that felt deliberate. Within those 47 minutes, a handful of scientists noticed something that still has no explanation. The object didn't just vanish, it reappeared, but in the wrong place. Based on its previous vector, 3I Atlas should have emerged near a specific solar longitude. Instead, it was thousands of kilometers away from that projected point. Its velocity hadn't increased enough to justify the leap. Its angle of return was off by multiple degrees. It was as if the object had skipped space. This movement defies every classical equation. Newton's laws, Kepler's orbits, even Einstein's corrections for gravitational curvature, none of it explains what just occurred. For an object that size to perform what physicists are now calling a non-linear vector displacement, something beyond standard propulsion had to be involved. And yet, there were no emissions, no flashes, no ion trails. The object simply reappeared, closer than before and perfectly stable. In theoretical physics, there are few concepts more controversial than the idea of spatial jumps. One of the most talked about is the Alcubierre drive, a warp concept that manipulates space-time itself, contracting it ahead of an object and expanding it behind. It requires negative energy and remains entirely theoretical. But even its critics admit that if it were ever observed, it would look like this: sudden displacement, no thermal trail, no acceleration curve. Another possibility being whispered is quantum tunneling at a macro scale. This is normally something seen in subatomic particles, not space rocks. But if 3I Atlas has a core structure capable of interacting with the quantum vacuum, or, more radically, of manipulating local probabilities, the blackout would make sense. The object didn't just move, it jumped probabilities. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has not released a formal statement, but internal leaks suggest their orbital models are now running hundreds of simultaneous simulations per day, trying to reconcile the new data. Most of them fail. The few that succeed require assumptions about propulsion technology we've never built, technologies we've only imagined. Then came the next anomaly, a persistent low-frequency hum detected by the Deep Space Network. It wasn't random, it pulsed, every 247 seconds exactly. No drift, no noise, just a clean beat, repeating through the void. At first, astronomers assumed it was feedback, then perhaps a signal from Earth bouncing off the object. But triangulation ruled that out. The pulse originated from 3I Atlas's new position. Not only that, it was coherent across different bands. That is, the wave structure held across radio, microwave, and low infrared. Natural bodies rarely emit in such uniformity. Natural processes, even highly energetic ones like star flares or planetary magnetospheres, do not repeat with precision. They waver, they decay. This didn't. For a brief window, the signal was publicly available. Amateur radio astronomers picked it up in New Zealand and southern Argentina. They recorded at least 10 clean pulses before the Deep Space Network servers went down. A maintenance notice was issued, but backup mirrors across the web had already stored the signal logs, and one strange thing was embedded inside the pulse. Not a language, not a message, a stream of binary. Decryption experts in multiple communities worked on it for days. What emerged was not poetry, it was not philosophy, it was coordinates. But these weren't galactic. They didn't point to Alpha Centauri or the direction of Orion's belt. They pointed inward, specifically to a zone within Earth's orbital path, slightly ahead of our current position in the solar year. When plotted, the trajectory intersects that location in the calendar year 2031. This is not an impact warning. The coordinates sit far outside Earth's atmosphere, but it is an encounter point. Something is scheduled, and for the first time, humanity is being given a date in advance. Not by NASA, not by the United Nations, but by something drifting in from beyond our star system, pulsing with perfect rhythm and now broadcasting a meeting point. It is worth remembering that 3I Atlas is not a lone object in the sky. It is part of a lineage, Oumuamua, Borisov, each stranger than the last, each introducing new anomalies. But 3I Atlas has gone further. It has moved against the rules, disappeared from all instruments, reappeared in defiance of physics, and now it is sending signals in pure numbers. No symbols, no emotions, just hard data. There are theories, of course, that this is a probe, that it is part of a distributed network, that we are witnessing the arrival of a system not built by humans and not meant to be understood by them easily.
Is sayonara now? The biggest takeaway seems to be that we are now getting to the point in humanity that we're getting way better at spotting these interstellar visitors. This is the third one so far.
Some say it is a test, others call it a warning. But the timing is too perfect. The blackout was not random, the pulse was not static, the date was not chosen by chance. And if what comes next is already locked into place, then we are not observers anymore. We are part of the script, and the next chapter is already written. The 2031 Return and Project Helios. When the binary stream was decrypted, the numbers meant little to most people. But for orbital physicists, the pattern was unmistakable. The coordinates didn't point to a distant exoplanet or even a star system at all. They mapped a point that will exist in Earth's orbital plane on a very specific date. The position matches where our planet will be in its solar path during the second quarter of the year 2031. This revelation forced every major space agency into an uncomfortable corner, because this object, whatever it is not flying by. It is not following a hyperbolic escape path anymore. It is now projected to loop back into the inner solar system, aligning with that exact point just as Earth crosses it. This is not a direct impact scenario. The object will not strike Earth, but the orbital match is precise enough to suggest something far more complex. It may be a rendezvous, a delivery, a second phase. NASA and the European Space Agency have not made any official statements about the date, but internal planning documents leaked earlier this month mention a mission called Project Helios. The project had been previously listed as a long-term theoretical study focused on solar sail technology, but those documents were quietly reclassified just one day after the pulse signal from 3I Atlas began. And the timeline matches a separate mission already in active development. The Comet Interceptor, an ESA mission designed to park in space and wait for an unpredicted comet to fly by, is scheduled for launch in the late 2020s. Its entire mission profile is based on adaptability. It is meant to launch early, hold position, and when the next unknown comet appears, fire thrusters and intercept. This was considered a scientific dream. But now, with 3I Atlas returning, that mission may be repurposed. The interceptor is equipped with high-resolution imaging systems, a suite of mass spectrometers, and a probe deployer capable of releasing small impactors to study surface composition. Originally, its targets were theoretical. Now it has a name, and the scientists developing its payload have already begun making changes to its flight path assumptions. There is another wrinkle. The binary message from 3Y Atlas came in before this mission's window opened. This means the object either predicted the interceptor's path or anticipated the need for such a mission. The implications are uncomfortable. If this object is broadcasting a coordinate inside our orbital path for 2031, and our agencies are now designing missions to meet it there, who is really leading this dance? Project Helios itself remains hidden behind layers of classified funding. Leaks describe it as a multi-agency initiative, spanning partners from the United States, Europe, and select Asian observatories. The aim, according to these internal memos, is not just to observe 3I Atlas. It is to follow, to replicate its course, to send a craft into its path and see where it goes when it exits our system again, if it exits at all. But there's a deeper concern buried in these memos. The idea that 3I Atlas isn't just responding to our system, but observing our responses. That it changed course not to visit us, but to see how we react. The pulse, the blackout, the binary signal, all of it may be a method of measurement, a stress test. And what we do next may become part of the data it collects. There are discussions underway now that go beyond science. Strategic policy meetings, Space Command briefings. Language experts are quietly examining whether the binary pulse resembles any form of computational logic used by advanced AI. Not just human, but post-human. Languages meant to be read by other machines. If true, it means the signal was never for us. It was for our machines, our satellites, our networks. In private, a handful of scientists are raising uncomfortable questions. If we intercept it in 2031, what happens then? What if it allows us to approach? What if it does not? And perhaps more urgently, what if it has already left something behind? The Southern Hemisphere is already reporting faint secondary pulses, not from the main object, but from somewhere closer. Anomalous echoes in the asteroid belt, a harmonic pattern that trails the original signal by a consistent time delay. It is as if something is repeating the message or replying. These echoes are weaker, but they are growing more consistent. Some believe this could indicate the presence of another object smaller, quieter, but following the same path. Whatever Project Helios was supposed to be, it is no longer theoretical, and the world is no longer watching an object leave our solar system. It is watching it come back, not by accident, not by gravity, but by plan. The idea of a probe or scout or delivery mechanism, is no longer a fringe theory. It is the working model. And if that model holds, then 2031 is no longer just a calendar year. It is a destination, a rendezvous marked by an intelligence we do not yet understand. And now the countdown has already begun. The resonant pulse. It began as a soft anomaly, easy to miss. A faint, low-frequency throb buried deep in the background noise of the universe. Not an explosion, not a flare, just a pulse, repeating every 247 seconds. Precise, mathematical, too clean to be random, too steady to be natural. The signal was first noticed by independent radio observatories scanning the region near the asteroid belt. Then by members of the International Asteroid Warning Network, who compared notes and found the same rhythm logged days earlier. It was not isolated. The pulse had been resonating across multiple bandwidths, low radio, mid-infrared, and shortwave, and in every instance the timing was exact. No deviation, no drift, just a single steady heartbeat. The strange part? It did not originate from Earth. It was not bouncing off satellites. And it did not match the signature of any known astronomical event. It came from the direction of 3I Atlas, or rather from where 3I Atlas had been, before the blackout, before the jump, before the course change, as if it left something behind. The nature of the pulse led some to believe it was a beacon, a homing signal. Others suggested a handshake, an encoded greeting designed not for us, but for any systems advanced enough to decode it. A kind of mathematical identification, not language, but intent. When plotted, the waveform revealed something else. Inside the pulse was structure, not words, not patterns like Morse code or spectrograms, but a sequence of intervals that mirrored one specific mathematical constant. Phi, the golden ratio, a number deeply embedded in nature, in spiral galaxies, DNA structure, and even the branching of trees. A ratio so common in biology that it borders on sacred geometry. This is where it becomes difficult to dismiss as coincidence, because the 247-second interval, the beat between each pulse, is also the amount of time it takes for a radio wave to travel nearly 74 million kilometers. That's approximately half the distance between Earth and the Sun, a number that has no direct relevance, unless you're mapping in solar scale. If the pulse is a signal, then its frequency is not just about timing. It may be a message about position, orientation, or resonance, a cosmic key waiting for a lock. And then came the silence. After several days of steady transmission, the signal cut out. No fade, no distortion. It just stopped, exactly as it began, sudden and absolute. The timing of its disappearance matched another disturbing moment: the reclassification of several observation logs by both NASA and the European Space Agency. Files that had previously been open to the global scientific community were withdrawn, access revoked, queries redirected to internal review boards. The silence from the agencies has been louder than any signal, because at the same time as the pulse vanished, new object tracking data for 3I Atlas stopped being published. No updated trajectory, no light curve graphs, just a placeholder note. Pending review. Observers in the Southern Hemisphere are reporting even stranger anomalies. Weak, repeated pulses from the far side of the asteroid belt, separated by the same 247 seconds but slightly shifted in tone. Echoes, perhaps, or relays, as if something else is now responding. Not just one object, but two. Speculation has exploded behind the scenes. Intelligence analysts are now involved, not because of the signal itself, but because of the strategic implications. If this is a techno-signature, if this is an artificial emission from a non-human source, then it changes the conversation. The search for extraterrestrial life has always assumed silence. This is not silence. This is presence. The concept of techno-signatures is not new. For years, SETI researchers have argued that civilizations might reveal themselves not through conversation, but through byproducts: energy leakage, repeating signals, orbital patterns that defy physics. But this is something else. This is a signature that moves, that shifts position, that responds. It is no longer a debate over whether life exists out there. The focus now is on what form it might take, whether it is biological, mechanical, or something in between. Whether it thinks like us, or not at all. Because if the 231 coordinate is real, and all signs suggest that it is, then we are on the edge of a scheduled event. One that does not belong to us. And here lies the real danger. Not in the object itself, but in how we respond. Our history with the unknown is not gentle. We fear what we do not control. We study what we do not trust. And we weaponize what we do not understand. So what happens when something from beyond sends a pattern we can recognize but not decipher? What happens when that pattern stops just as we begin to listen? What happens when every telescope meant to watch the sky starts receiving instructions to look somewhere else? The disappearance of public data, the coordinated shutdown of deep space telemetry, the silence from official channels, all of it points to one thing. A wall is going up, one that separates what we know from what we are allowed to know. But a few facts remain. 3I Atlas is still out there, its course has changed, its pulse has stopped, and its return is scheduled. Whatever left that signal in space, whatever wrote those binary coordinates into the vacuum, it knew we would find it. It knew we would decode it. And it knew that once we did, the only question left would be this. Are we supposed to go meet it? Or are we supposed to wait for what comes next?